So hello everybody. Today's Thursday Things is all about track systems and mud. Mud. So for those of you who haven't met me before, my name's Marianne and I'm the founder of Wilor, which is a source of information to help you to heal your horse, mind, body and soul. Naturally. So mud is something that comes up this time of year as the weather turns and we start to drink more hot chocolates. And we become stuck in it. It's just everywhere, especially if you live in the UK where it's really, really wet, or if in your own country it's wet most of the year, or when it rains, it rains. So I've been thinking about this because I live on a heath, which means that it is naturally wet land, which isn't technically ideal for horses to be on. But here's the big but. If you think about it, my land is dry most of the year. It's only really wet for some of the year. And I find that it's really, really difficult in the winter to put the hay nets up for the horses to get about and all that malarkey. But at the same time, it's also very good for the horses as well. It's great for the muscles and great for like resistance training almost. And it also helps me to see what their health is truly like. So horses when they're in movement are at their most healthiest because they are designed to be constantly moving. They're designed to move and roam thousands of miles each year, mile after mile each day, through their natural habitat. So they're designed to move. So having them on a track system like I have mine on a Paddock Paradise track system, it's great for keeping them healthy. Now it would be great for us if we also moved around all day, but their legs are different. Well, their musculature is different because obviously they've got hooves rather than feet. And if you look into the feet, they expand and contract. As a horse puts their foot down, it expands a little and then contracts again. And that movement helps to pump the blood up and down the leg. So when the horse isn't feeling that great and they're in muddy conditions, that's when they start to get issues like mud fever, which isn't that good for the horses and is a bit of a pain to deal with, and it's just not great for everybody. Now, I've never had to deal with mud fever, which is absolutely amazing considering how much mud I have, and especially last year when it was all flooded everywhere and it was a pain, and the mud was so deep and my wellies were, in real danger, and I was really hoping that any second they didn't have a hole in them, because if you're wearing your wellies most of the time, most days, they do wear quite quickly. I mean, I have a new pair of wellies every year because I just go through them that quickly. The movement of my foot in it because it's rubber or something close to it, after a while that wear and tear creates cracks, and then you get a wet foot, and you really, really hope you don't get your wet foot in the middle of winter when everywhere's flooded or everywhere's just muddy. So mud is something that we constantly have to deal with, especially when it comes to a track system, because a track system, your horse is on the same bit of land, they go round the same track. They go around the same patch again and again, which means that it gets muddy very, very quickly, and then the mud gets really, really deep really, really quickly, which isn't good for us or them really emotionally. You see your track system like a foot deep of mud, you just like, I don't want to put hay nuts up over there. I don't want to trudge for all that lot. But you make yourself, because your horses need to eat. They need their hay. And just because you don't want to put up with it for 5 minutes doesn't mean that they don't have to put up with it 24/7. So I can see why people become seasonal trackers. Well, have track systems seasonally for their herds or for their horse, because obviously a track system is great for making sure your horse doesn't have access to laminitis causing sugary grass or grasses that cause any other range of ailments that just come out of an upset digestive system. So I find that I don't blame anybody if they have seasonal tracks. And actually last year and the year before, when the weather was just so bad, I was moving fences. I was moving my electric fence, and my track system got wider and wider, and to the point the previous year that one of the fields I just slowly sort of almost strip grazed it to give them more space, because the mud was just so deep. As I said, live on a heath. I have lots of clay around me. It retains lots of water. It gets really stupid. Now, my horses do have hard standing in the fact that they can come into the stable yard. And also I have a gravel path which goes down part of my first field, which is a sturdier ground, but it's also in a location that is almost a drainage ditch initially before I put that track in. So it is almost acting as a French drain, which means that it does get flooded, which means that it does actually get quite wet, which I can understand. They don't want to be standing in the water. And it is a great way for them to come in to the yard, and it sort of washes their legs off before they get in. And I can understand why they want to spend a lot of the days in the winter just in the yard. I really don't blame them. But at the same time, I do make the effort. I do go and put the nets out in the fields so that it encourages them to move. Okay, they might have to go out into the mud for 5 minutes to go and stand to eat some hay for 5 minutes, but that little bit of exercise causes expanding and contracting of those hooves, which causes the blood to circulate better in the legs, which means that they have a better defence from any ailments that can arise from the mud being on their skin constantly, which is a real concern for me when it comes to my two cobs. So Midnight and Pagan, they both have really bushy feathers, traditional gypsy cob type creatures, and it does mean that I have to be very careful. Now, because I'm really kind to my equine podiatrist Helen, I do trim the feathers, which it may look a bit like a mum cut, but I take the feathers up to the top of the coronet band so that it exposes the hoof so that she can do her work as best she can without having to worry about getting effectively dreadlocks of muddy feathers in her way. Plus I find it's more better for them because it gives there's less chance of there being mud constantly in their feathers, which is then constant moisture against their skin, which is obviously uncomfortable and not very nice, and it's cold, and that's the way that I look after them. I know people do take the feathers off completely, which isn't something that I do, purely because I don't have the time for that. And it's taken me a while to get Midnight just comfortable with me trimming her feathers, let alone taking them off. That's just a whole ball game that I am not prepared to go down at the moment, and our relationship isn't prepared to go that far. And she's happy with me trimming her feathers. She falls asleep while I'm trimming her feathers, so I'm happy with that. I'm happy to leave it there, and I will keep an eye on her legs, and if she ever shows anything silly like mud fever, then I might change my mind. But at the moment, that's how we work, and it works well. Obviously, when the mud gets so deep that it goes up part of her feathers, there's only so much I can do. But it's a help, and it's what I feel that I can do at the time. Now, obviously, on the drier days, and especially if they don't go out all day, then I do have the option of waiting for their feathers to dry out, and then I can brush the mud out, and then check their legs and all sorts of that thing. But I also have taken to trimming the tails. Now, this is something that I would have absolutely cringed at, and I did cringe at it when I did it the first time last year, because I like my tails all long and bushy and just beautiful on the floor. but it wasn't working for my girls. They were getting mud in the bottom couple of inches of their tails, and it was then slapping on their legs, and it was just keeping the mud in their feathers, and it was just an extra thing of misery as far as I could see it. In my opinion, they might have been absolutely fine, just going whatever, but to me I was like, oh, that's cold mud slapping on your leg, love, you all right? So to help them, especially for little Spring, who is a miniature Shetland and she's wading through mud that's up to her hocks, I trimmed the tails up to the hock level, and it made a difference. Their feathers seemed to be drier. Little Spring, her legs were in a better condition. Now, she wasn't getting mud fever, but she was quite sensitive with us picking up her back legs, and it was very, very, oh, I don't like it. So in taking her tail up to her hock, her legs were drier more times than not, and I think that helped her. I mean, if you got a wet trouser, you don't want somebody grabbing onto your leg, do you? So I just went with that mentality and went, I see what you're doing there, girlie. I understand you. I can see your logic. Let's do something to make sure those legs are drier. Let's make sure we do something so it doesn't feel so icky. So that really, really helped. But obviously there's still mud everywhere. And it's not great for us as well. You know, you're going along in your yard trousers like I've got on at the moment, because we've come in from doing the horses and I've got my jumper on and stuff like that. But, you know, if you've got wellies on and you're slap full of mud all the way up the insides of your legs, up to, you know, the insides of your wellies, inside edge of your wellies, because you're walking along, which means you every now and then your legs do brush, especially the way that I walk, and it means that the mud works its way slowly up the insides of your wellies. And then you crouch down to, I don't know, scratch little Spring's belly, or pick somebody's feet out, or pick something up off the floor. And then you don't realise until later that because you've effectively sat back on your muddy heels, you've got mud all the way up the backs of your thighs. Which isn't great, that then you come in and you're like, oh, I can't sit down anywhere until I disrobe. And then you're in the mentality, because you know that that's a possibility, that every time you go to bend down, you're sort of doing this weird hover thing, or you bend at the waist rather than bend at the knees, and you're like, this isn't good for my back, but I'd like to sit as soon as I get in the house, or something to that effect. Or if your horses aren't outside your bedroom window, you gotta get into your car and you got a muddy butt, and you don't want to be doing that with a muddy butt. So then you get the weird hover going on, and it's just, you feel like a crazy person. So mud is just an absolute pain for everybody, but at the same time, as I say, it's beneficial because it's almost resistance training for our horses. And I've noticed when my horses are moving about in the thicker mud, the movements are a lot slower, they're a lot more determined, they're a lot stronger, and it's like, I am getting through this mud, yeah. You're like, go on, well done, you'll get through that mud. That being said, as I say, I do move some of the electric fences when some of it gets really, really bad. In my first field, at the end of my gravel path, there's actually a gully that they go through in the summer, and it's just perfect with the hawthorn, well, they should be bushes, but they're currently hawthorn trees, or they were, and a cherry tree. So it's just like, it's just lovely. And it's a nice gully, and I've got logs in there, so they've got to pick their feet up over it, and it's just great. But in the winter, it fills with water. It does fill with water. At the moment, it's quite deep mud. So the water table hasn't reached too high at the moment. But we'll see. It'll be interesting to see whether we get as much rain and water as we did last year, because I think that is going to be a real test of our horses and the land. Because if we're going to get flooding every year, I'm going to have to really, really think about my track and make permanent plans. I know in one of my previous Thursday Thinks, I was talking about my latest update on Egypt, and talking about how I'm determined to put in a permanent track system. Now, by that, I don't mean that I have permanent fences to protect the insides of my field. No, that's not what I'm talking about. What I'm talking about is a permanent surface for my track system to be on. or my horses to be on the track system around my first field, because I'm focusing on that first field because that's where they are when most of the time when the hay's being cut, and it is the muddiest field because it's the one they go through the most to get to the yard where the bucket feeds are and the rest and shelter and everything like that. So it's the most important one to get right, and if I'm making it permanent then it's the one I need to focus on most. So obviously having a permanent surface track system that functions properly will mean that there'll be no mud for them to worry about. So when the weather's at its worst, I can then just restrict them to that single field track system and they'll be absolutely fine. And with Egypt having its issues this year, they've actually spent a lot of time in that first field. And initially I was like, oh, that's a little bit of a small field for them to be in. Now it's about 2.5 acres big, so they've got a track system all the way around it. And actually that's plenty of space for 2.5 horses, 4.5 horses. So it's actually plenty of space. So I've come to realise that over the past few months with them being on it and not really having any issues with being on it. Oh my god, my nose is itchy today. So if I want to put them on a permanent track system, a permanent surface track system, then that is probably the most ideal field. It's also the one that the farmer doesn't go into, whether it's to cut the hedges because there aren't really hedges to deal with and he can get to them from the other side, and also the middle of that first field. The grass doesn't get cut in there for hay because my horses are in there when the hay is being cut, so there's no real worry about having to make access for large vehicles and tractors to get through other than our little Massey Ferguson. So it's not going to cause too much of a drama, and obviously it will save us from trudging through mud and save our herd from trudging through mud, which is a good thing. Now obviously the moisture is good for the hooves to a certain extent, and obviously the minerals and the mud and the turnover of the mud is actually good for the ecosystem as well. So there are good sides to mud, but for us to go trudging at a field, it's something that we want to avoid because we can't use the wheelbarrow either. Now I don't poo pick my fields or my track system. The only part of my track system that I do poo pick is my gravel path for obvious reasons, and also the yard for obvious reasons. Now that the gravel path I don't have the wheelbarrow for, I just have like washing up gloves and I just chuck it over the electric fence into the middle of the field. Grow grass, grow. And the grass in the middle of that field does grow a lot because the amount of poop that I do throw over from the gravel path. Unfortunately, my herd don't go in there because it's actually the start of an orchard in the middle of that field, which is great for us because obviously the trees benefit from the extra nutrients, and the trees are actually taking up some of the water from that field, and it is quite a wet field. But yeah, so I don't use the barrow for that, I only use the barrow for the yard, but I do have a separate barrow for taking hay up the field because I have to put up 6 big nets and 6 small nets. So it is a lot to trek up and down with. Oh, it's easier when I've got the barrow. But I can't do that in mud because it just gets stuck, which is a pain in the tuchus because nobody wants to be trudging around with hoofing great big hay nets on their back when they've got a herd of hungry horses behind them going, oh, I'll just nick some of that. You're like, no, I'm having enough trouble getting through this mud. Don't you dare touch those nets on my back. So then you're there rotating a few ends to your ropes going, get away, whilst also trying to walk through thick mud. Joys of life. But it's also a great workout for me. Let's find the positive in this. It's also a great workout for my legs, my thighs, my butt, and my arms in twirling whilst carrying heavy hay nets. And yeah, it's good for the cardiovascular system as well. It does give you a bit of a workout. So positives as well as negatives. So as I say, my herd have never had issue with mud fever, which is down to the track system, constant movement, and the herd just being healthy, living on a a set diet, as it were, of hay nets constantly. The boys are currently having feed. Obviously the major, because of his age, he has trouble keeping the weight on if he just has hay. So he just has hay cobs and some stuff for his digestive system, and that just keeps him tickety-boo. And obviously Egypt is currently having a bucket feed as well to get some good stuff into his body and to help his digestive system calm down after whatever it is that sets him off every single summer. We're starting to narrow in on what that's actually causing that, so that's good news, and hopefully a permanent surfaced track system will be a lot more beneficial for him as well. Obviously it just comes down to funds, and also comes down to time of doing the construction. So lots of interesting things ahead. Don't worry, I'll be taking you on the journey with me. So I think that's it for me today. I hope that you've had insights. I hope I've been able to give you positives as well as negatives, because mud isn't all bad. So let's try and keep positive whilst we're trudging through ankle deep, hoping there's no holes in our wellies. So that's it for me today on these Thursday Things. Join me for next Thursday for the next Thursday Things. I'll try and get a notification up for you as soon as possible so that you know what I'm going to be talking about, so you can join me live. If not, I hope that you've enjoyed watching me on replay. Don't forget to subscribe and click the bell icon on the YouTube channel, where there's a whole archive of videos. I believe there's about 80 odd videos over there. Some of them are past Thursday Things, and others are information about various plants, herbs, and also the track system, and a little bit about what we get up to around the farm every now and then. Don't forget to like the Facebook page, join the Facebook group, and check us out on Instagram, @Wilor, for virtually daily updates on the herd. And I will see you all next week. Bye!